Rumors had been circulating about Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb for quite some time, but nobody had anticipated this. Finally breaking her silence, Lisa Weiss drops a bombshell that turns the story on its head in an exclusive surprise. Her revelations are sad as well as shocking. Secret negotiations, covert dealings, and a ruined dynasty founded on falsehoods. The world is on the verge of collapsing. Up until this point, you believed you understood the full truth. It began on a low key. Something that was about to burst into a raging inferno was moving almost too silently. Dear Lisa, after more than 30 years of marriage to famous Christian marital counselor Doug Weiss, Weiss felt she could no longer remain silent. It appeared at first to be no more than another painful breakup, a couple who had just grown apart, parted ways, and moved on. However, Lisa said that the reality was far more sinister and is more complicated than what was initially believed. Instead of seeking vengeance, she stayed hidden. It certainly wasn't how she presented it. Lisa said that she was sick of being the bearer of other people's secrets. Revelations that, if not made public, would just shield those responsible for her harm and, maybe, the deception of an entire society. Doug was more than simply her ex-husband. He was an inspiration to millions, and he built a profession by helping people repair broken relationships. The reason her truth was so shocking: their marriage had been deteriorating for some time, according to Lisa's account, and the divorce papers were never even filed. Not only did Doug physically distance himself from her, but she also characterized his emotional distance. His heart and soul went into. As he focused on his career, public persona, and ministry, Lisa remained alone at home, perplexed by the change in her formerly confident partner. The distance wasn't the hardest part, the subsequent rapidity was. Not even 2 months later, Doug with Joni Lamb after their divorce was finalized. Dyer co-founder Marcus Lamb's widow Joni was a longtime Christian friend and colleague of Marcus's. It hit Lisa like a ton of bricks. It wasn't merely the moment. The message it conveyed was crucial. That the 30 years of joint work between her and Doug were suddenly rendered obsolete. Not enough time to mourn. Gone without a trace. No time to reflect. After the divorce, Lisa began to wonder if Doug and Joni's relationship had truly begun. It hadn't, her gut told her. It didn't feel unexpected the way they appeared so at ease and prepared to start a family. It had the air of premeditation, as if it had been simmering away in the background all along, even while Lisa fought for their crumbling marriage. Long had she been in the dark, she pondered. The amount of time that had passed since Doug's emotional separation from her, when she was still struggling to maintain contact. Afterwards, the calls began. Lisa recounted an encounter with Joni that had a profound impact on her. Shaken. According to her, Joni was enraged. She spewed venom about her son Jonathan, saying things Lisa could hardly believe, in stark contrast to the serene, collected woman she saw on Christian television. His threat level was high. He was ruining her, she thought. According to Lisa, Joni went so far as to defend a man who was facing serious assault charges by claiming the accuser was lying. Lisa claims that it was at that very time that she witnessed Joni's other side, the one she believed the public should be aware of. There was more to Lisa's truth than a broken marriage. It revolved on an ongoing habit of secrecy and the need to maintain control over a story that did not reflect reality. While she didn't pretend to know everything, she did believe that her tale fit into a greater context, one in which outward appearances were more important than internal integrity, where difficulties were buried in order to safeguard names, titles, and standings, and in cases when the parties concerned avoided confronting the truth, her truth, because it was too painful. At last, Lisa spoke up, and her words were genuine and unfiltered, not scripted or staged. In her voice, you could perceive the anguish, treachery, perplexion, and resilience all at once. She mustered all her strength to speak these things aloud, exposing herself to scrutiny, assessment, and conjecture. People, she realized, would pick sides. She would be referred to as bitter by some, and called her courage, but she had grown disenchanted with labels. She wanted everyone to listen to her. She has now had her story shared widely on YouTube and other social media platforms. Disagreement has arisen. While some deny it, others claim to have. Could always tell something wasn't right. Regardless of the potential discomfort it may cause others, Lisa continues to stand by her words, not to bring anyone down, but to finally come out of hiding and say it like it is. I was contacted by Joni Lamb. The fact that the Joni who called me wasn't the one from TV was the most shocking thing to me. She was absolutely bound. She was fuming. "Jonathan is trying to kill me," I said. "He's trying to kill you." She was even more irate that I would compliment her son. Then she went on to scream, "He's ruining the business. He's ruining us. He's ruining me." I shot back, saying, "No, Joni. Something terrible has transpired, and there's been an essay." "Oh no," goes the reaction. Afterwards, she stood up for Pete. He has caused Pete immense pain. Yeah, that Pete, about whom Rebecca and JW penned that long letter. Pete, the one Rebecca and JW have decided not to let into their house. I think that Pete is an admiral. She accused Susie of being a pathological liar and blasted her for making these claims about a wonderful man, the chiropractor, who is now dead but has a record. The words Joni chose to use with me shocked me. I pleaded with her. "Please reconcile with Jonathan for yourself. That would be the hope," I suggested. I beheld that aspect of her. All I can say is that it's quite different from the Joni you see on TV. Don't sweat it. Same as that lovely individual. However, I did catch a glimpse of that individual in the video when they discussed how Jonathan has been involved in a smear campaign. Plus, I don't understand a word you're saying. To my knowledge, Jonathan had not been involved in a smear campaign. For Lisa, I had seen Jonathan. After they broke up, Doug's Sunday sermons were like icing on the cake. While she stayed alone in her house, forgotten, he preached to congregations and appeared on television as an expert on virtuous relationships. The Doug Who's. Everyone could see that she was well-groomed, cheerful, and knowledgeable. In Lisa's latter years, Doug was emotionally distant, preoccupied, and withdrawn. She began to question whether she had really met him in real life or if the world's admiration of him was an illusion based on her perceptions of him in the past. First step. Things that had seemed meaningless at the time began to resurface in her memory. Whenever Joni's name was mentioned, there were cryptic text messages, unexplained absences, and abrupt mood changes. When Lisa first saw them, she thought they were just stress. Doug was crushed. However, looking back, it seemed like they were all interconnected parts of a bigger whole. What they imagined was anything from a sweet, new love story. It was the culmination of a protracted process that began far before the divorce was officially finalized. It wasn't simply that Doug moved on that stung the most. It was his way of doing it. Effortlessly, swiftly, and without ever mentioning the harm that was done. Lisa was never given an honest assessment, an apology, or a chance to go on. She went from being his wife to becoming an afterthought in his life. Beside Joni, almost immediately, she established herself as a permanent presence in Doug's life. The woman who had once offered Lisa a friendly wave was now standing where Lisa had been for more than 30 years. Numerous friends reached out to Lisa, offering words of consolation such as the possibility that Doug and Joni had simply found solace in sharing their sorrows. Joni had recently lost her husband Marcus Lamb, after all. The timing and the feeling that her suffering was being diminished were too much for Lisa to ignore. While reveling in a romantic second chance, expressing sorrow, seeking solace, or being forthright were all deemed unnecessary. The pace was too rapid. Silence was the worst part. The whispers went unanswered by Doug. He kept mum regarding Lisa, the reasons behind their breakup, and his hasty remarriage. He continued to act as if nothing had transpired while posing for photos, petting books, and giving interviews. Lisa heard more accusations than any allegation could have sounded. It tore her out of his fiction, since her role was no longer relevant. Lisa would lie awake at night thinking about it all over again. Laying there, she'd wonder whether there had been warnings she'd overlooked earlier. Doug had always seemed aloof, but was it because of Joni? In that split-second, identifiable point when her marriage changed and she failed to see it? She couldn't shake these inquiries. Worst of all, she was well aware that she would likely never receive genuine explanations. Lisa felt isolated in the aftermath, despite the support of her grown children. It seems like the church community that had welcomed them as a couple was now divided. Some others stuck by Doug because they refused to accept the idea that he had messed up. A number of people silently extended words of consolation and disbelief to Lisa out of sympathy. Nevertheless, suffering transcended mere sentiment. It was very spiritual as well. When Lisa's marriage collapsed, she found herself questioning everything she had dedicated herself to: her faith, her trust, her identity. It crossed her mind that she might have let God down, that her incapacity to maintain. She wasn't faithful or strong enough to be married to both of them. A sense of shame that wouldn't leave washed over me. Because it may be incredibly devastating when the man you've centered your life around abandons you and acts as if it never happened, after you've spent your entire life trying to be the ideal wife. It wasn't Lisa. Rallied support by speaking up. It wasn't her intention to tarnish Doug's good name. All she wanted was for everyone to know that the idealized portrayal wasn't necessarily accurate. Polished press releases and idealized YouTube videos were drowning out her voice, and she needed her voice heard. Real suffering was going on behind the scenes, and she wanted everyone to know it. There was actual treachery, and the price for that treachery was more than simply emotional distress. A shattered sense of self emerged. When asked about the beginning of the treachery, Lisa claimed it wasn't with the union of Doug and Joni. Years ago, when she reached out but found nothing waiting, it all began with the quiet, the emotional distance. Instead of counting days or months, she counted the ways she was gradually removed from the life she had contributed to. This was her chronology of betrayal. It narrative of a single man's transition wasn't the only one. The plot revolved around a woman clinging to something that had previously been snatched from her. A woman who had confidence in love and faith in God, but who saw both crumble before her eyes. Finally, by being honest with her, reclaiming what was lost is Lisa's goal. Nothing about her. Not Doug, not the marriage, but her own voice, dignity, and value was under attack. Because coming out, calling it what it is, and refusing to let it define you are the final steps to healing from betrayal. Years ago, Doug Weiss constructed a unwavering standing in the community. For many in the Christian community, he served as the model for marital therapy. An honest, wise, and devout man. People all throughout the nation have his books on their coffee tables. In his preachers and podcast hosts cited their counsel. He was invited to talk at churches on the importance of a life centered around love and commitment, how to save marriages, and how to prevent infidelity. More than that, he was a counselor. He was a symbol in many ways. Plus, when such kind of person trips and falls, the bang reverberates harshly. Doug was a real-life example of a married man. That was the general consensus, however. His union with Lisa took center stage, frequently used as an illustration of a robust Christian alliance. For more than 3 decades, they were a couple. You can't put a face on that, can you? That was the general consensus, however. Perhaps that's why the sudden revelations were so shocking. Reason being, when any damage to a person's reputation, which is based on something very personal and ethically ingrained, will be perceived as a betrayal by everyone who had faith in them, even their spouse. There was no immediate media frenzy when word got out about Doug and Lisa's divorce. Naturally, misunderstandings occurred. Along with some subtle conjecture, the Christian community tends to be cautious when passing judgment. Many were willing to give Doug a pass. Perhaps issues existed that we were unaware of. Perhaps it was merely a tragic circumstance involving 2 individuals who had detached themselves from one another. A few short months later, though, Doug remarried, this time to Christian media star Joni Lamb. Things started to go downhill after that. Joni was someone I knew. She was a veteran of the scene. Doug and she both talked it. Circumstances became involved in the same religious groups, and suddenly they were wed. It was all overly rushed, too easy, and too scripted. It was no longer possible to disregard the concerns brought up by the rapidity of the marriage. Did you feel something similar? Did more happen behind the scenes than was previously known? When Lisa started talking, the victim's reputation took a serious knock for the first time. She refrained from becoming emotionally violent. Even though she refrained from acting out, the impact of her quiet, shattered candor was greater than that of any spectacular. No news story could. She described feeling emotionally ignored, invisible, and betrayed as she saw her beloved spouse transform into someone who valued attention from the public more than genuine human connection at home. What made her statements so impactful was not their vengefulness, but their honesty and vulnerability. Queries began to flow from the crowd. Who could trust Doug with their marriages if he hadn't even kept his own? His platform seemed to be built more on branding than reality, if he couldn't even practice what he preached. How about Joni, though? There was her personal reputation to safeguard. She was married to Marcus Lamb, a giant in Christian television who passed away recently. It was believed that Joni, as his devastated widow, would continue his work. All of a sudden, she got remarried, and not to any old man, after a recent divorce. Yet, one whose standing was established by dedication. Not immediately, but gradually, the backlash increased. Online communities became distant. People in the church murmured. Many who had previously cited Doug started to clear out his books. A number of prominent figures stood up for him, stating that even counselors need grace because no one is flawless. But some people felt tricked. The abruptness, the lack of sound, the peculiar blending of events. Something was off. Such fissures are difficult to mend in a society that places such a premium on outward appearances. Nor did Doug's lack of response assist matters. He provided only a cursory account. Nothing about Lisa's suffering or the question that has been circulating has been addressed in the lengthy post or video message. Whoa, that quiet said it all. People devised their own answers when there weren't any. Furthermore, in the absence of reality, reputations do not last. It wasn't simply dirt that Lisa had to deal with in terms of her reputation. She also sensed it. Behind the scenes, she has been a dependable companion for decades, providing assistance for the brand, stood silently by his side as he basked in the limelight. Even though she didn't seek attention, it came her way. Her private anguish was a part of a public unraveling. In sharp contrast to the bright, smiling picture ops of Doug and Joni's new beginning, her calm dignity stood out. The hushed discussions eventually blossomed into more animated exchanges. People in charge of the church, who had invited Doug to speak before, started to second-guess themselves. Without public announcement, conferences scratched him from their schedules. Fewer books were sold and the trust. The years of hard work vanished in a matter of months. It wasn't that Doug had failed, everyone does, but rather that he hadn't taken responsibility of it. The community expected someone in his position to exhibit humility, and he hadn't done either. He hadn't acknowledged the grief. The most important takeaway from this: it has nothing to do with Lisa, Doug, or Joni. It explored the consequences of prioritizing public perception over personal honesty. When the truth takes a back seat to the brand. When someone whose reputation is on the line because they have people's trust in them forgets that it's not just constructed in the dim light of day, it is fashioned in the stillness of your most intimate relationships. That dog's tale could have turned out differently. It might have been a story of truthfulness, humility, or salvation. He was expecting couples he worked with to be vulnerable, but instead, he remained silent and refused to explain or communicate. The fissures were merely made deeper by counsel led. The individuals who once looked up to you as an example of faith and love are the ones you harm, making it even more difficult to repair a damaged reputation. A career was not the only thing Doug ended up jeopardizing. He undermined everything he had labored at for decades. And it wasn't only a scandal that had consequences. The event served as a sobering lesson that one's reputation isn't determined by their stage presence. Upon the curtain's descent, it becomes etched in their memory. After Lisa came clean, the public's response was more than just strong. It went boom. Doug Weiss's longtime fans were surprised, perplexed, and, for many, severely let down. Posts, comments, and lengthy threads attempting to decipher the events flooded social media. The betrayal hit close to home for many of Doug's devoted fans. He had their full faith, and they had followed his relationship advice for their own relationships. Their once solid reputation had crumbled, and they were confused about who or what to trust. Some initially sought to defend Doug by saying everyone should hold off until they heard the whole story. They brought up his years of experience, publications, and therapy sessions. No one is flawless, they continued, and that includes everyone. That defense, however, was short-lived. It got more difficult to turn a blind eye as Lisa spilt the beans. It was impossible to tell that she was plotting vengeance from her level head and measured delivery. It seemed as if the speaker had been suppressing their feelings for an extremely long time, and felt they had no other option than to express themselves. The news that Doug had remarried so soon wasn't the only thing that shocked people. The build-up to it was the most important part. His public relationship with Joni Lamb, the gradual breakdown of his marriage to Lisa, and the emotional maltreatment that she detailed. Questions with no simple solution started to circulate. Did Doug's divorce actually mark the beginning of his relationship with Joni? How came everything happened in a flash? Was there something more going on in the background than was apparent to anyone? This wasn't merely a celebrity scandal for many in the Christian community. The experience was troubled soul. Neither a politician nor a movie star was Doug. They looked to him as a spiritual leader for direction on matters of the heart and soul. His sermons had been read in church, in therapy sessions, and weddings. Sermons. So, it was deeply hurtful when the man who had advocated for marriage equality appeared to quit fighting all by himself. Thus, the man parted ways. Groups inside the church that had previously advertised Doug's book started discreetly removing them from sale. Those in charge of the event who intended to hire them to abruptly switch up their rosters at conferences. Not everyone has spoken out publicly about how they feel about him or the incident. There was a huge domino effect. A whole ministry was brought crashing down by a single revelation from Lisa. Not only that, but it wasn't just Doug. There was an equal amount of focus on Joni Lamb, who was well known for her appearances on Christian television. Those who had followed her for a long time started to doubt her honesty. Had she any role in this narrative? Right from the start? Did she have anything to do with the breakup of Doug and Lisa? The fact that their long-standing professional relationship just served to inflame matters further. Fans who had previously liked her began to wonder if the actress they were seeing felt the same way. Not all of the story. News broke as people delved more. While some have been officially confirmed, others have merely been rumored. There was an opinion from everyone, and the internet made sure everyone could hear it. Sections for comments evolved into savage regions. After all their suffering, others stood up for Doug and Joni, saying they deserved to be happy. Some people slandered them, saying they were betraying their trust, manipulative, and hypocritical. A chasm existed, and it was widening daily. As a result, Lisa ended up enveloped in an unforeseen surge of encouragement. Strangers who had never heard of her were contacting her to express their gratitude for standing out. Her tale resonated with women who had been through similar situations. Her openness touched everyone. Her forthrightness stood out. She became an icon of unassuming courage and perseverance amidst a media frenzy. She became one not because she aspired to, but because everyone else needed an ally.